Welcome everyone to this session on smartwatch development for Android. Before we get started, just a quick couple of survey questions. How many folks are building Wear applications already? Anybody? One person. Oh. All right, how many folks have an Android Wear device? Okay, a few more. Interesting. So not many folks are building stuff for the Wear, which is kind of interesting. You usually get a few when I give this session, but that's good. That means that except for the person who is already building Android Wear stuff, everybody else will not be bored. So we're going to talk about the capability, go into the development, and talk about integration with the phone, and kind of get an overall picture for what it means to design and build for Android Wear. So I'm going to spend most of the time talking about design, elements, architecture, and then when we actually get to the coding part, it's actually very straightforward. There's not much different than building something for Android Wear versus the Android phone in terms of just the Android APIs, right? But we'll get into some of the capabilities first, just to give you an idea of what's there. So for those of you who already have one, you probably recognize the screen. The Android Wear devices have a touch screen. They do have a microphone, but there's no speaker, and there is a buzzer that just does just standard vibration. And some of the phones, some of the Android Wear devices also have a health and heart monitor and other things like that. Right? So me personally, I sport, this is a Moto 360. I got this about 9 months ago, I think. But the Moto 362 is about to come out soon. So if you're looking for a bargain, you can pick up the first gen Moto 360 for fairly cheap now. But the second gen one should be out, or has it already come out? I know they thought they were going to announce it at Google I/O, but they didn't. Does anyone know if it's come out yet? I haven't been keeping track of it that closely. But anyways, and there's a ton of other great watches out there. And so the one on the left is a Moto 360. The one on the right is an Asus ZenWatch. Probably the best looking one that's out right now is the LG Watch R, which looks like a sports watch, essentially. So anyways, there are a number of devices out there, and there are more coming out. We'll see if Samsung comes back into this market. They don't really produce an Android Wear device. They have the Live, which is essentially a variant of the Gear, but they haven't really put out one for Android Wear. Their smartwatches actually use Tizen as opposed to using Android Wear as the operating system. So now how many folks have built something in Tizen? Yeah, pretty much nobody, right? So anyways, so there are some nice devices out there. Oh, I forgot to ask, does anyone have an Apple Watch in here? Wow, have they started selling them here? They have, okay. So it's surprising that nobody has one. I have one. I interchange between iOS and Android because at my company we build for both platforms, so obviously you have to carry around both devices, or at least that's what I tell the person who signs the checks, right? So how can I build for iOS if I don't have an iPhone 6 Plus with 128 gigs of RAM, right? Or memory. Anyways, back to Android Wear. What I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is smartwatch design, because I assume everybody in here is a developer, right? And if you're like me, I'm not a designer, but I'm a developer, and having me design something is probably a bad idea. That's why we have a designer on staff who does, understands UX and all those other types of things. It looks like if I step that way, it gets louder. So a couple of quick things in terms of just the overall capability and design for Android Wear. There are two major areas. They're called notifications and glances in terms of how we approach designing for Android Wear. So when we look at a notification versus a glance, you see on the right, this is a notification and this is a glance. You can see they're slightly different in terms of how they look, but more importantly, they're different in terms of how the interaction with that specific type of thing is. Okay? A glance is just something that the user can interact with, but doesn't have to. And a glance can typically go away. Again, that's like the weather thing here. A notification is usually something that the user has to dismiss. Okay? But glances can also be something that the user actually has to dismiss rather than
being persistent or non-persistent, that is. Right, so when we think of a glance is essentially small contextual information from some kind of app. So the built-in ones are weather, navigation, but you can do your own glances as well. Okay, everyone is probably familiar, and we'll have a look in just a minute to see what some of the glances are on the device. But it's quite nice with the glances that you get for the notification. I can have my Android phone in my pocket, put directions in, like walking directions when I was walking back from the place last night. And as you're walking, it basically vibrates. You can just turn your wrist over. It says, make a left here, make a right here. You know, your destination is 200 meters ahead of you on the right or whatever. So it's quite nice. You can just keep your phone in your pocket. And you can just walk around, and you don't have to, you know, normally you'd have to walk around like this, right? Okay, am I going the right way or whatever? But with the glances that you get from the navigation application, you could just look at your wrist. So it just kind of looks like you're looking at your time, and, you know, people don't say, oh, look, that guy's a tourist. He's walking around with his big phone trying to figure out where to go, right? So it's nice because it's a little bit less noticeable in terms of other people seeing you trying to navigate. But anyways, so the notifications are things that we consider to be time sensitive, right? So this would be something like a text message, calendar notice, and of course, sports scores. Okay, so if you have the ESPN app, for example, if you have the alert set up in the ESPN app, ESPN is basically, do they have ESPN here? I think they do, right? It's basically a sports channel in the US. So if you have their application, you get notifications onto your watch, onto your phone and onto your watch. And we'll talk more about notifications in a minute. But one key thing to note is that notifications automatically get propagated to the watch. You'll see that when we run the demo in a minute. You actually don't have to do anything special for a notification to show up on the watch as opposed to just on the phone. You can tell it not to show up and stuff like that, but by default, all notifications go to both places. And if you have your phone in your hand and you dismiss a notification, it will automatically get dismissed from the watch, so that you don't have to dismiss the notification twice. Okay, so it's actually quite nice in that way. But when we talk about designing for the user, and I actually stole this from somebody. This is not something I came up with, the graph at least. But I agree with the principle that they're going for here. When we're designing for the phone, the idea is that the blue time here is time not using the device, or basically free time. And then here, get the phone, right? So it actually takes a minute, especially if you have, you know, the bigger phones, it takes a minute, or maybe a few seconds is probably a better way of saying it. It takes a little while to dig it out of your pocket and turn it on and then go do something with it. Right? So that's what the red time here is. And then, obviously, because it's a large screen device, I'll pull up Twitter, and it's like, oh, I got a Twitter notification, like actually one just came in, right? So I'll pull up Twitter, and I'll say, oh, okay, whatever, and then you put it away, right? So that's the amount of time you spend on the device. So this is time not using anything, time to actually get the device out of your phone or your purse or your pocket or whatever. Time you actually spend on it, put it back into your pocket or purse, get it out, use it, etc. Right, so that's how we design when we design for just a standard phone. Right? Everyone's done this, or at least has used a phone app, so you understand what that work looks like. When we design for the watch, though, this is what we want to do. There's no red here because the watch is on your wrist, so you never have to take it out of your pocket. You just basically flick your arm over like this, and the screen automatically turns on. Or if it's a notification, you know, it'll obviously buzz and the screen will turn on for you automatically. You don't even have to flick your wrist to get it to turn on. But the idea is you get these notifications and glances and other things, and the user, there's no time to take it out, so the user spends a little bit of time interacting with it, right? The key word there being a little bit of time interacting with whatever your application is doing. Whether it's a notification or you're having them actually do something or whatever it may be, the idea is that you have very short, limited interactions when you build for Android Wear as opposed to Android on the phone. Right, it's a key design concept. And this slide could actually be applicable for the Apple Watch as well. Same concept. The user doesn't need to spend a lot of time, or you don't want the user to spend a lot of time interfacing with the watch. Just little short interactions. That's what we aim for when we build something. Right, so if you guys saw the demo video from Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, you know, they have this thing where you can send a text message and the guy draws something on his watch and then emails it to his wife, and it's all very cute and stuff like that. But it's not really very useful, unfortunately, right? So even they have the same kind of low minimalist interaction style. Right? So again, tactical usage is what we call it. We don't need to get the phone out much. Most notifications don't require a response, right? And the first bullet on this slide, which is need to get the phone out less, is actually really true. If you own an Android Wear device, at least I found that the amount of times I take the phone out of my pocket during the day, or if it's on my desk, the number of times I switch it on has gone down by about 90%, right? That's not an exaggeration. Basically, the phone stays in my pocket most of the day, and the number of times I have to pull it out of my pocket or turn it on my if it's on my desk charging or something, has gone down by almost 90%, right? And that's kind of the point when we look at this slide, right? You give the tactical usage. Yes, the user will use the phone eventually to do something, but that's okay. All right, so talk about some design principles, specifically around Android Wear. Right? So one thing is that when you create a module inside of your main Android project for an Android wearable module, it will get installed and launched on the app. The Apple bundled app will also automatically install it onto the Wear device. So you don't have to do anything extra. The user doesn't have to do anything extra to install a watch application. It's just there as part of your bundled application. Same thing is actually true for iOS as well. And the idea is that the design principle we go for is suggest and demand, and zero or low interactions with these things on the watch itself. Okay? So one thing is, for example, what we call the context stream. So if we watch this short video, you'll see kind of how the user is meant to interact with it. Okay? So there's some kind of notification, right? So Google Hangout looks like a booking. Touch that check-in if you want. That would probably launch the app, or maybe just do check-in or something, right? So this is what we call a context stream. You scroll up and down to see the glances and notifications that are currently in context for whatever's going on at that point in time. Okay. Let's go to the next slide, and let's look at the cue card inputs. Right? So the idea that we have is we can do inputs, but they're a little limited in terms of how we can do that on the watch itself. Okay, so you start with the cue card. I can just touch on the screen somewhere, right? You don't even need to have a cue card, as we'll see in a second, but you can scroll. I want to set an alarm, call a cab home, get an Uber, or whatever. So the idea is that you have these kind of cue cards that you scroll through that allow you to take some kind of input, and your Android application can create a wearable extension that can be part of this input stream if you want, right? And obviously the way that we do input, aside from tapping on the screen, is we can also have the user speak into the phone and do automated speech recognition, kind of like what you can do with Google Now on the Android phone, right? So on the watch, you can do ASR, automated speech recognition, to get input from the user if it's not just a tap or something. All right, so again, our design principle is we focus on not stopping the user. It should be kind of a smooth flow where the user doesn't necessarily get lost in the watch very much. They spend a little bit of time with it, but we don't try not to stop the user. They're continually moving, doing something. All right, so what that looks like is something like this. If you notice on the right, you can't really see it that well yet, but there's a number 5 here. So we aim to have most interactions completed within 5 seconds. All right, so let's go play this and you'll see what I mean. Oops, sorry about that, hit the button too early. Go back, okay, let's try this again. Okay, so you see speaking into the phone, doing something, done, 5 seconds. Okay, navigate to work. Navigating, 5 seconds, ready to go. Okay, and you can see this is the pop-up that I was telling you about. All right, email pops up. Look at it quickly, dismiss it, we're done. Okay, so again, we'll loop through this one more time to give you an idea. All right, take a note, 5 seconds. Next one is we're gonna see the navigate to work, 1, 1000, 2, 1000, 3, 1000, 4, 1000, 5 seconds, start navigating. And then the last example is email comes up or SMS, toggle over, and then you hit archive. Right, so the idea is we keep the interactions low and we keep them smooth, and we keep it kind of the user moving with it all the time, right? Because it's a small screen, you can't put much content on it anyways. It's not like they're going to read something on the phone itself that's of any duration.
Does the wearing devices have the ability to, I don't know, use the voice command, for example?
So the question is does Wear have the ability to use the voice what?
Voice commands.
What do you?
I don't know. Navigate to work.
Oh yeah. So what you do actually to do input, the only way you can really do input is either by gestures or taps, and if you need to take text, what you have to do is you basically tap on the screen, and then on the device itself, it'll just start. It's recording right now, right? It doesn't work that great in this emulator, but the idea is that all you have to do, if you want to interact with the device, let me get this back on. Okay, it's running a little slow, right? So as soon as you tap on it, or you just say, "Okay, Google." So like on this device, I can just say, "Okay, Google," right? And it'll pop up, and so you don't actually, the user doesn't even have to tap it once it's on to tell it to start recording your voice and do some specific command. Okay, that's a good question. All right. So the other thing is we have to design for big gestures, right? So as a developer, you're like, yeah, this looks pretty good, but no. As a designer, you look at it and you say, wow, the screen is only like, 40 millimeters across. So you have to design for kind of big gestures, and it's okay if the user has to scroll a bunch to get through all the different options, but you can't have very fine-grained gesture control on the Android Wear device, right? It's just not possible because the screen is so small. Right? And the other thing is, we saw this in one of the demos just a second ago, we designed for stream cards, right? And what do the stream cards look like? They look sort of like this. You have a card that is, right, there's not really much here. Oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Basically, these stream cards allow you to just pop open this could be a notification, it could be some other interaction that you want to do with the user, but the stream cards are basically the kind of the main entry point into your application, either on the watch or on the phone. So we have a couple of different ways that we can do user interfaces. The first, we already talked about, were stream cards. You can also do full screen apps if you want, okay? These are typically, don't really see a lot of these, to be honest with you. Most people just hook into like the notifications, glances, and other things like that. And then once that pops open, the user can like respond in some way. But you can also do full screen apps, and there's also the possibility to do watch faces, right? So there are a bunch of watch face apps out there. So if I open up this real quick, I'll show you an example on my device actually of a full screen application. Let me get it up real quick. And it's the most important app you can have. Can you read that backwards? What does it say? It says Domino's. All right, so I'll touch on this thing right here. It'll take a second, and you can see there's a picture of a pizza. And what the app is actually doing right now, it's tethered. Obviously, the app is running full screen on my watch, but what it's doing right now is it's actually doing a geolocation to find out where the closest Domino's pizza is to me so that I can order it. And then what I can do is once it's up, it'll say, what do you want to order, or go order from your history, and then you tap it, and then it'll automatically order it for you. So it's quite a nice app. But like I said, you don't really see a lot of these, and it looks like it's gone to sleep. Why did it do that? Let's try that again. So I think it's trying to geolocate something right now. It's not having any luck doing it. But it's a pretty decent app. There's another one on this. Let me show you real quick. The one that I find really useful actually is the Evernote application on this. So with this Evernote app, you can't really see it that well. Let me sit down and see if I can position this properly for you. And so you can see that says find, and I know it's backwards, but you can take a note very quickly with it. You can tag a location. So I find this full screen app to be really helpful. But the point I'm trying to make here is that typically, you might think, hey, let's build a full screen app and have all these features and stuff like that. But typically, we don't want to do that, right? Even though, as a developer, you may think that having all these great features on the wrist is good. Usually, unless like you're something like Evernote, where you just want to be able to quickly find and take notes on the device, yeah, then a full screen app is useful. But typically, hooking into the glance and notification system is more than enough to do what you need to do. All right. So again, a watch app is embedded inside of an Android application. It's essentially just another module as part of the same project. And when we talk about communication between the main app and the watch app, you have to push stuff to the watch from the main application. And then on the other side, once something from your app is open on the watch, you have to listen for events essentially coming from the watch. Because obviously the watch is connected to the main application, or the phone to be specific, via Bluetooth and Bluetooth LE, right? i.e. Bluetooth 4.0. So you have this kind of communication that's going on over essentially a wireless connection, a Bluetooth wireless connection. So you have to be careful how much stuff you push to the watch. You don't want to push large images and other packages onto the watch because it can take a long time over Bluetooth 4.0 to push those images onto the watch. As we'll see in a second when we run the demo, even though it's running locally, it takes a little time to send large images and other things onto the watch. And it also slows the watch down if you send a lot of heavy stuff from the phone over to the watch, okay? Because I think this Moto 360 is running a 400 megahertz TI processor, so it's pretty slow, right? When we're talking about in terms of megahertz. And obviously, all these watches are optimized for one thing, and what is that? Battery life, right? Everyone cares about battery life, even though everyone charges their watch every day. So, you know, the typical Android Wear watch, the battery life will be anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. The battery life just doesn't last that long. It's because it's an underpowered device with basically a backlit LCD screen, okay? Anyways, we'll get into some of the coding here in just a minute. But earlier I was saying how notifications pop up on both the phone and on the watch. So when a notification pops up here, it also pops up on the watch. If you dismiss it on one, it gets dismissed on the other. So if you have a notification, if you look at it on your watch and you dismiss it, on the phone it'll also get dismissed, which is nice. So you don't have to dismiss the thing. Right, so again, the watch app launches automatically. You don't have to do anything. Once that bundle with your new app is on there, you're essentially ready to go. All right, so let's get into developing for Android Wear. Two basic steps you do. You add some dependencies and you add some Wear actions. Right, the dependencies are all encapsulated, especially if you're using Android Studio. They're all encapsulated and prepared for you when you add a wearable module to your existing Android phone application project. Okay? And again, it's just packaged inside of a regular app, but it has its own Android manifest.xml. It'll have its own resources, everything like that, and it's specifically denoted. We'll see in a second how we denote that app as the Wear app as opposed to the phone app. Okay? So, right, we've already talked about how it's automatically connected. So what we do is we essentially go in and we create a new module in Android Studio. So let's say you already have an existing application, right? So here's my manifest.xml, Android manifest.xml. Let's make this a little bigger so we can read it, so I can read it. Okay, this is one of the sample apps that they have, but if we look through this, you'll see that, and let's just search for Wear, right? So you'll see that the only reference we have to Wear here, this is in our main phone application. The only reference we have to it is that we've set up this service and have an intent filter, and what we're specifically doing is we're binding to the wearable device to listen for events coming from the wearable device. Again, if you recollect how this works, right, the watch is separate from the phone, right, connected over Bluetooth, so it's connected over radio, and what we have to do on the main app is we have to push stuff to the watch and we have to listen for events on the watch. So when the user interacts with the watch, we need to be able to receive those events. So what we do is in this case, what we've done is we've set up everything in the listener service, and then we have to have an intent filter. So if you're an Android developer, you probably know what an intent filter is. So I won't go into that right now, okay? But we're essentially saying listen for stuff coming from the watch here. And then if we open up this listener service, and that font is way too small. Okay. And let's make this full screen, actually. All right. So this is that listener service that we had in, again, we're looking at the main phone application module, not the wearable module yet. We'll get to that in a minute. If you look at this project here on the left, you'll see that here's our application. We have a separate module in here for all the stuff we want to share between the watch and the phone. And then we have a separate module here for the actual wearable components. We'll look at the wearable in just a second, but let's continue looking at this listener service that we were looking at in the Android manifest, right? So you can see listener service extends wearable listener service. You still have to declare it as a service and set up the intent filter for it to be able to receive those events. And you can see all we have to do now is we just have to override on message received. And we're using some constants to see basically what, for this specific application, what it is that we are interested in doing. You can see we have clear notifications, start
start navigation. So these are just things programmatically that I've done, the events that I know I'm going to receive from the Wear device, right? So if we look at the constants, you can see that's where those navigation, or basically all those different things, were created, right? So this is stuff not in Android Wear, it's stuff part of this specific application, right? So I'm in the shared part of it, and you can see I just have a simple DTO object here that I use to share the attraction. So let's do a quick demo of the app, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how some of the things happen in it, okay? And one thing I do want to spend time on, aside from just the coding part, and again, the coding is actually relatively easy. If you know Android, coding for Android Wear is very, very straightforward. You already know how to do it. You don't really have to learn much, to be honest with you. But let's have a look at this specific application. Right, I'm going to talk about the setup in a little bit more detail later. But what I'm doing is I have two emulators running, obviously. This emulator right here, this is the Genymotion emulator. If you guys build stuff for Android and you're not using Genymotion, then you're doing something wrong. You should use Genymotion. It's way better than the built-in stock Android emulator. Right, so I have my main app running in Genymotion, and then obviously I have this. This is just the standard Wear emulator here. So what I'm going to do is, in this little sample app, I'm going to send a notification. Right, in just a second you'll see it pop up. That is if we haven't lost, I think this, oh, there it is. Okay, so here's our notification. It popped up. We can scroll up. You can see that there's an image in the background here. And then, again, we use the page card to go left and right. Okay, and then I can send an action. So what we need to do now is we have to listen for this action from the watch on the phone application, right? Because I'm going to send it an action. I'm going to tell it to do something. So when I touch this, come on, don't die on me now. And of course it's going to die on me now, right? All right, there we go. Let's try it now. All right, so let's open on phone, and you can see that it opened it on the phone. How did that happen? First of all, how do we trigger that to begin with? How do we trigger that notification? Let's start with the notification, then we'll go from the phone to notification on the Wear device and come back. Okay, so in here I did test notification, pop that open in just a second here. Well, you saw it already, so you saw the notification, right? So if we go in and look at our code now, we have stuff in a utility service here. And what we do is we basically just construct a standard Android notification, but we give it a couple of extra things that are useful on a Wear device. So we use notification compat.builder. We say, create a new one of these. We set the style, right? Let's set the picture to be this for the background, right? And if I actually, let's open this notification here. Right, so you can see that, and my stupid emulator doesn't feel happy today. Okay, right, so you can see that the notification has the same words, Sydney Opera House, nearby tourist attractions. So you see that the notification is exactly the same on both devices, right? And you see the background here has basically the Opera House there. And if I get rid of this notification here, it should in a second, I have it open on both devices, unfortunately. It should actually have dismissed, but this is running a little slow, unfortunately. So anyways, let's go have a look and see how we set that up. All right, so we set the specific style, which is called big picture, basically show a big background picture and then put a cue card on top of it. That's what the big picture should be. Set the content, set the text, right? Set, we go and set the content text. Oops, what happened there? I didn't delete anything. Oh. Set the text, and then we go and we set the intent that we want to pass back when something happens on this. So if we go look at the pending intent here, you'll see that the intent that we have is detail activity, get launch intent, and we're basically saying create a launch intent to essentially go and have the user, when they get into that notification, the last step, if you recall, if this were working properly, that is. Okay, let's pop the notification again real quick. Okay, come on. This doesn't like it for some reason. Let's see if our ADB is working okay. It seems to be alive. At least it thinks it is. Okay, there it goes. Just need a little poke. Right, so that last thing that we set, which was the pending intent, that adds this open on phone for us, okay? So let's go back to our code. There was our pending intent, get launch intent, i.e. this is the specific intent we want to include as part of this. So you can see we used that pending intent down here for essentially what do we want some action to be. And then we go and add a bunch of stuff to this. We're not really interested in that. And then when we're ready, we say notification manager from here, go and notify using this builder that we were just looking at, right? But this notifications, everything is standard on Android, on the phone. The only extra stuff we really added here is we added that intent to go and open the application, and that got translated into an open intent on the watch device as well. Okay. We also went and added a couple of extra things, but we haven't done anything really specific for the wearable at this point. Okay. So, all right. So this is, if we go down here, we can see how we're sending some data to the wearable. We use this Google API client builder. We add the wearable API to this, and then once we have this, what we're going to do is we're going to make a connection onto the device, and then essentially we're going to go and upload some images from the phone up to the watch, right? Let me go find the exact block of code. All right, so right here, when we send the data over, we use the wearable API, data API, put data item with that Google API client, and then we wait for that to finish before we carry on. Okay. So this is relatively straightforward from the watch side, from the Android device side. If we go look at the rest of this Android manifest, we don't really have anything else in here that's very interesting, just our standard activities and other things like that. Let's go have a look now at what we have in the wearable. Okay, so here's our Android manifest for the wearable. And the key part of this here is if we look at this, you'll see right here at the top, uses feature Android hardware type watch. Okay, so I didn't actually put this in. The way that we would add this into an existing Android app is we would just go to File, New Module, and then we would say, let's create a new Android Wear module. We have this, we have the application name, module name, but if we look closely at this, you'll see that the package name is grayed out because it's already detected that there is a Android phone application here. So it says, whoa, looks like you're creating a Android Wear application, companion Wear application to your Android phone application, so it'll have the same package name. So they do have to share the same package name. If for some reason you don't use Android Studio to do this, then you have to bear in mind that you have to use the same package app for this. Okay, and we're not going to finish this at this point, but we could if we wanted to. All right, so it went and added all this stuff for us, and you saw it had the min SDK. In this case, I have it set to 21, which is Lollipop, I believe. Right, and you can see if we, as we scroll through this, we have our standard activities. We'll look at this activity in a little bit more detail in just a second to give you an idea what it looks like. But you can see what we also do is on the wearable side, we also go in and we bind a listener service here so that we can kind of listen for events coming from the phone to the watch. So we have to bind the listeners in both directions, essentially. Right? We also have a utility service. But let's actually go look at one of the things in the drawable, the layout. Okay, so this is your standard Java res folder or resource folder. And we have a bunch of stuff in here. Let's open up one of these guys. And you can actually, and hopefully this works. Yay, it didn't work. Okay, let's try this again. Right, so you can see that this is the standard new UI builder that's incorporated with Android Studio nowadays. So you can literally just come in and kind of drag and drop some stuff onto here if you want it. Okay, so you can build stuff like this, or you can build stuff programmatically if you don't want to use the layouts and lay like all the components out and stuff like that. Right, so, but again, this is exactly like building for Android phone, no different. There are little nuances you need to know, but in terms of like the overall setup, the architecture, or the layout of the project, it's all the same as a standard Android phone application.
with a couple of little small caveats for the Wearable app. All right. Just check to see how we're doing on time. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about, so done a quick flyby with the actual, how do you build something for this? We looked at some of the code for how do we pop a notification, okay? And let's have a look at I don't think there's anything interesting in the receiver, right? We said a few things in the receiver here for the intents. This is the utility receiver. Go back to here, sorry, our utility service. Let's make this a little smaller. Let's show notification, right? So for example, if we want to clear the notifications programmatically, we again would just call notification manager, cancel the notifications that we have. We have a couple other things, nothing really interesting here that is specifically around Android Wear, unfortunately. This specific application is a sample app that comes with Android Studio, so you can install this directly from Android Studio, assuming that you've installed the API level 21 with the code demo. So you can just go in and say, just go install the sample app, right? So you can browse this at your leisure when you want, just by opening up Android Studio and saying, go install this specific sample application. Okay, so what I want to talk about for the remainder of the time actually is the setup that's used here. And most people I know tend to test on the actual hardware device, and that can be a little bit of a pain because you have to build an APK, you have to get it ready, package, blah, blah, blah. That takes a little while, and then you have to copy it onto your phone and then wait for it to install on the watch, right? So that whole development cycle is rather lengthy. So what we're doing here is we have Genymotion and we have the standard Android emulator installed. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. Okay, so I already showed how you add this to an existing project, right? Target it to specific stuff. And how do we set up the emulators for testing? Right, so you need to have a phone emulator and a Wear emulator if you want to test all this on your desktop. And what I use as the phone emulator is something called Genymotion. So if you're not using Genymotion for doing Android development, you should really look at it. You can get they have basically a free version and a paid version, but I've always used the free version and haven't had any trouble with it because I only generally test on 1 or 2 devices in the emulator, and then we test on our 12 devices we have in our test lab to make sure it works on everything, right? But essentially what you do is you go into Genymotion, you set up based on the profiles, it'll give you the opportunity to select different API levels and select a specific type of device. So we could hit add here, right? And then I could say, what kind of device model do I want, 4, 5, or 6? What's the Android version I want? And then it basically sets everything up. It uses VirtualBox underneath the hood to run everything, so it's extremely fast compared to the standard Android emulator not using hacks or x86 virtualization. Okay, so once you have that set up, unfortunately you're nowhere close to being done. So what you have to do is you set it up, probably want to set up with 5, and then there's this black art of setting up all the Google services and stuff you need to actually make this work and behave like a real phone, okay? This bullet right here will probably take you an hour to do. Unfortunately, you have to go find all the packages and you have to install all the Google services onto the Genymotion emulator. And then once you have Google Play services installed onto it, you log in with your Google Play account and then you go add and install the Android Wear app on the device. But first, to be able to get to this point where you have the Android Wear app on it, you have to go and install all the Google services. So if you do a web search for it, you'll find, just do a web search for Genymotion, add Google services, and you'll find a step-by-step guide on where to download the possibly illegal package binaries to install this onto your device, or your emulator, okay? All right, so once you have that installed, then for the actual Wear emulator, it's pretty straightforward. You go into Android Studio and you create I'll show you real quick. Just make sure you create the right API level version for this. So where's our AVD manager? I'll just be lazy and do it here, right? So we can come into here and we can pick from this list. We can say, these are my current devices. Let's go, why is this screen so big? Okay, let's go create a virtual device down here. And then you can see with this newer, latest version, I can pick a Wear device that's either square or round and test on them. Okay? And that actually brings up a good point. There are two different types of watches that you can get today, square one and a round one. So what do you do about assets that you need to include as part of your project that support both square and round? So similar to what you do with Android on the phone, if we go into our application here, right? You see, I'm in the resource folder here on the wearable. If I go into the drawable folder, right, what do we have for the drawables in our main Android application? Right, so if I go into drawable here, you'll see that, and again, I'm just switching back for a second. This is the phone application, not the wearable one. But if we open this up, you'll see I have HDPI, MDPI, HDPI, XXHDPI, right? This is standard Android stuff where you have to provide these images in the 4, 5, 6 different sizes, right? So similarly for the watch, you can probably guess where I'm going with this. If you go into the folder for the watch, drawable, you open this up, we have XHDPI, HDPI as well there's probably two large groups of resolutions, HDPI and XHDPI on the watch at this point. But what we do to kind of accommodate for the square or either is it square or is it round, what we do is if you look closely here at the bottom, you'll see that inside our layouts, we have a slightly different layout for square versus round for this grid pager that we were looking at earlier, right? So if I open both up, they look slightly different. You can see that we've sized it different so that it just kind of fits better on the screen on one device versus the other. And what we can do here to make this a little bit easier for us to work with is I can just go switch this from square to round so that, you know, as you're kind of building the layout, you kind of get an idea of how everything fits on the screen, okay? That's how we accommodate for square and roundness, and of course you have to provide images in the different resolutions. All right, so we have our Wear emulator set up, we have our Genymotion set up, and there's one final step we have to do, and that is we have to link these two devices together. Essentially what we're doing is we're creating a virtual connection, not over Bluetooth because these are just emulators. So what we do in this case is we jump down to the command line. We say ADB devices, and on the command line, this thing right here will be our Genymotion emulator. Because again, it's running inside VirtualBox, so it has its own IP address and everything. And this other emulator right here will be our Android Wear emulator running in the standard Android emulator. And what we have to do from here is we have to connect those two together. So we'll say ADB-S, this is the IP address and port of Genymotion. We want to do a forward operation, connect the two debug ports 5601 together, and that basically creates a connection between the excellent question. So the question is, can you do the same to connect a physical device? And the answer is yes. You can do the same thing as long as they're on the same wireless network, right? Whether you're trying to connect a real phone to a virtual emulated whatever, or other way around. You just have to know the IP address that you're connecting through. So you can do that. There's one additional step that you have to do for that. Actually, there may not be. I think you just need to have the IP address, and you may need to put the phone into like debug mode or something like that, right? Basically send an ADB command and tell it to say you want to run in debug mode or something, right? But yes, you can basically do that. Okay. All right. So we have everything set up, right? I've shown you some of the code already. Right? We can obviously explore the sample applications, but to get to the sample apps, you basically go into the file menu and you can install them and run them directly on the emulator if you want. Okay, we have already looked at how you send a notification, how you launch a phone app. We've done that whole round trip already, so we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. And again, when we look at this, this is just a standard notification, right? We're not really doing anything extra special except giving it some hints for the notification that we want from one to the other, right? So we set all these things specifically, and this emulator wants to die now, doesn't it? There it is. Okay. So when we hit phone, and then this block app is not something we added, obviously. It's what Android adds. In case for some reason an app gets a little bit too chatty, you can usually swipe all the way over to the right and say, okay, I don't want to hear any more from this app. Right? And then the user has to go back in and enable it somehow in the preferences. All right. Let's see if we have. Well, the other thing I wanted to show real quick is the grid pager view. Okay, so this is the full screen app that I was talking about earlier. All right, so what we'll do is we'll basically, when we hit this, it'll launch a full screen application. And now we can browse up and down, left and right. All we're doing is just using a grid pager, and it has like a little description. And then when we hit this, it will start doing, and of course this won't work because my Google services on this emulated device has been having some trouble. I probably need to update everything at this point. Okay. So let's look at a couple more things. We'll open up the floor for some questions, right? How do you open something on the phone? We did a walkthrough of everything already, right? Here's some references to a couple of the different things that I mentioned earlier. So, yeah, so that's a quick overview. Designing, developing for Wear. If you're an Android developer already, it's relatively straightforward. If you're also looking to build stuff for iOS, obviously you can't share any of the code between Android Wear and iOS device, but a lot of the same design principles are there. And at least for iOS, nowadays, when you build a Apple Watch application, you can write everything in Swift instead of having to write it in a language, programming language that's from the 1990s. So it's supposed to be a joke, but I'm talking about Swift versus Objective-C, obviously, right? I hate Objective-C. So is this being recorded? All right, more questions?
Yeah, how about the connection between the Android phone and the device? Let's imagine that, I don't know, we have 3 watches in the room, several Android phones, and is there any kind of authentication or something? How does it look like?
Okay, so you're saying on the physical device itself, how do you connect this thing up, right? So let me show you real quick. So the way this works is, there are 2 ways you can do this actually. If you just open up, actually I might be able to just do this here. Let's try it here first. There it is. So what you do is you open up Android Wear. There's actually an Android Wear app on your phone, and you go into there and you basically pair it with a new wearable. Okay, and what happens is the wearable will have like a little number or something on it, and then when you pair it, you basically put that number in to specifically say this wearable should be paired with this Android phone, right? So you know there.
Accept it on your watch, for example. You need to accept the connection.
I don't remember actually.
Because if
it's
close, somebody else could connect to your watch.
right.
That's my question.
Right. I see. There's a little something that you have to do there. I don't remember because I haven't paired this watch in a long time. I think there's something on both sides, but honestly, I don't remember. It's not. And of course, this is not going to work. But I do remember that you had to put in like a little code on the phone, but not on the watch. So I don't think that's a big deal, right? Unless someone's trying to play a trick on you. And it's nice because you can just use the Android Wear app to do this instead of having to go into the Bluetooth settings and set it up. It does like a bunch of steps and installs like the latest stuff that you need on the watch. So it kind of manages everything. And the Wearable app actually also allows you to do something really interesting, which is, aside from watch faces, you can kind of configure like, okay, for voice action for navigate, right, this is what it's going to use. If I have more than one, it would allow me to pick like Waze or something else on it if I wanted to, right? Okay.
More questions? Yes, sir.
Can you write HTML5 app on the watch?
Why would you want to do that? Sorry, the question was can you write an HTML5 app on the watch?
Yeah, just
So
to avoid all the clutter with Android Studio.
Okay. So this I'm going to put this down because I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant now. Okay. I'm just kidding. I'm just picking on you. The short answer is you don't want to write an HTML5 app for the watch. People have tried this already. They've tried to bootstrap essentially a web browser thingamajig onto the Android Wear device, and it doesn't work very well because it's very, very slow. Okay. And the other thing is, as we're going through these design kind of principles that we have for Android Wear, if you're building an HTML5 app, you're basically going to be ignoring all that stuff, and you're not going to be using all the stuff that you get out of the box, like the notifications and the ability to style for different watch faces and things like that. Yes, I know you could theoretically do all that in HTML5, right? I'm familiar with things like PhoneGap. But at this point in time, it's probably not a good idea to build an HTML5 app for the phone. I'm sorry, for the watch, right? Building an HTML5 app for the phone using something like PhoneGap, that's one way to build stuff, and it works okay depending on what you're building, right? But for the watch, unfortunately, whether it's Apple Watch or an Android watch, you have to write it natively, okay? So we actually build our main app not using HTML5, but another framework that essentially generates from a single code base two different, an iOS and an Android application from a single code base. So I'm very familiar with the whole PhoneGap and other things like that, right? But for the stuff that we did for the watch, we had to write the Apple Watch stuff in Swift, and we're working on the Android watch stuff using Android Java, basically, okay? It's a good question, though. I know people are interested in HTML5, and that's fine. It's not there at this point, though. There may be someday soon. The best way to do this, in my opinion, is instead of embedding a web browser, use kind of HTML and CSS and JavaScript and have it kind of generate an Android project for you, right? So, but yeah, it's getting used to Android Studio is it can take a little while if you haven't done it before. And you don't want to know how long it takes to get used to using Xcode. So that's a different rant for over a beer or something. So, okay. All right, more questions? Yes, sir.
Create fully autonomic full-screen application, or it always has to be accompanied with
So yeah, so the question is it possible to create a freestanding watch application that's not necessarily on the phone? At this point in time, it does have to be bundled with a phone application for when you actually want to publish it, right? So you can kind of just install a Wear application or Wear module onto a Wear phone, but when you actually get to distributing it, it has to be included as part of the a phone app bundle for it to get out onto the marketplace, okay? So for example, there's one app I showed you here. It's actually the watch face that I run, right? So this is, make sure there's no notification. So this is a specific watch face that I have. Let me get Photo Booth up. And it'll be upside down, but you'll get the idea, right? So you can see that this is called the, damn it. It's called like the Weather Watch Face app, whatever, right? But if I go into my phone, the way that you install this is you actually need to have, so if you look there very closely where my finger is, you'll recognize this guy right here, right? That looks like the watch face that I had. So I had to install that app to get that watch face on here, right? So the short answer is you have to have them. You have to have it in the main app. There's no way around it at this point in time. And that's also true for iOS at this point, right? If you want to build an iOS or Apple Watch app, that at this point in time currently also has to be bundled with the main application. I don't know if Apple's going to change that. They announced a bunch of changes in Watch 2.0, but they did not say that you can have a freestanding app on the device yet. Okay. More questions? All right. Yes, sir.
Developing for wearable apps seems heavily connected to Google services package. Is there a way to develop an app without the Google services? For example, if I have a Kindle Fire phone,
Yes.
Amazon-style system, I can use the Google services. Can I use Kindle Fire with
Okay, so you actually you have two questions in there. The first question is, can I use my Android Wear device with a Kindle phone, Kindle Fire phone? Okay, so the short answer to that is I don't know. All right, but the meat of your question was, it seems like there's a heavy reliance on Google services and Google APIs to do Android Wear stuff, and that is 100% true. So if your phone isn't running, and so if we go into here and we pull this guy back up, right, this was our Genymotion emulator, right? If you don't have this app right here installed onto your phone, the watch is more or less useless. It's just a watch at that point that doesn't do anything except tell the time. Okay, so the short answer for that at least is yes, you have to have Google services. I don't know if it's possible to run on a Kindle Fire phone, right? Do basically watch, companion watch app with an app. I know I've seen people hack Google services onto a Kindle device before, Kindle Fire device, but I don't honestly. We haven't built stuff for the Kindle in a long time, so okay. All right, more questions? All right, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed the session.